This is our first unit in geometry, and we need to make sure we know all the terms before we go on and do a lot of things with these terms. So you'll want to have your notebook out, and you'll want to take notes as we go through this. Pause it as you need. So the basic terms, we're going to learn about a point, probably what you're thinking. It's just a dot in space, and it's labeled by a single letter. Then we have a line. Notice the thing that's key about a line is it has arrows on both ends. It's named by letters on the line. We also have a ray. I always like to think of a sunshine. A ray has one point on one end and then it goes off in the other direction. It extends infinitely with an arrow on the end. We have an angle. And an angle is formed when two straight lines or rays intersect. So here we have our A, our B, and a C. This point where they come together is called a vertex. And it comes from a Latin word meaning angulus or corner. We also have complementary angles. So you're probably familiar with a right angle. That's a 90-degree angle. Complementary angles are simply two angles that add up to a right angle. So this would be one of those angles. And then here is our second angle. Together, they add up to a right angle. They do not have to be right next to each other just like that. They could be separated, but they ultimately add up to a right angle, which you know is 90 degrees. We also have something called supplementary angles. And this would be two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So you may recall a straight angle is 180. Well, here is one angle. And then here is its supplement, the other side. Now we have something called vertical angles. These are fun. These are made when one line and another line intersect each other. So you have two pairs of vertical angles. I'll mark the first one. That would be angle 2 and angle 4. And they are what's called congruent. That means equal. So if this is 100, then this one would have to be 100. The symbol congruent is an equal sign with a little squiggle. You also have another pair, and you can mark that with doubles because you probably aren't using colors like I am. And this is where your mind needs to be able to see that these are on a straight line. So angle 4 and angle 3 are on a straight line. So 100 has already been taken, and now you need to get it to add up to that straight angle. So you're left with 80 to fill that in. 80 is congruent to the other side, so 1 and 3 are congruent. So whenever you have two lines intersect, you know you have two pairs of vertical angles. They are congruent. Now we have a word called adjacent angles. This simply means they're next to each other. I like to think about this as though they each have their own room and they're sharing a wall. So here's angle right here, and the room next door, they share a wall, and you're trying to keep them to be quiet, and you're saying, oh, there we are. We have a side in common. We know nothing about them except for their position. They could be any measure. Now, what you'll need to do in tonight's work is you need to name a line segment. So the way you name a line segment is just like a line, only it does not have arrows on the ends. It has letters on those points, and you can name it in two different ways. You can name it DI with the line over it, or you can name it ID with the line over it. Don't name it by the middle because then you wouldn't be giving the entire length. The entire length is DI. Or ID. Now, you'll see that line segment, we have that again, we can say it's the same as before. And then the difference is when you're naming a line, I have the line segment on here just so you can see the difference between a line and a line segment right on the same page. But a line would be named by its letters. And there's another way to name a line. So I'm going to throw another letter on that. So P, N, and I'll put an O. Now, I say this because this line goes on indefinitely in both directions. So we could actually name this 6 ways. So you can say PN with arrow both directions, NP, and I'll know we're referring to that line. You can also say PO or OP because those points are on that infinite line. And lastly, you can say ON or NO. 6 ways to name the line. Notice it's different than the line segment where you have to name it by its endpoints. We also have that ray we talked about before. So it has an endpoint Q and it goes on in only one direction. So the important thing with a ray is that you name it from the endpoint, QE with the arrow facing the E, or QR would both be appropriate. They're both points on the ray, but what's important is that we start with the endpoint. Now, the way we name an angle, we have 2 ways to name an angle. We always use its vertex, and we can either call it informally angle M by its vertex, or we can call it angle OMN, where we use all 3 letters, or we could do the reverse of that, angle NMO. What's important is that the vertex is in the middle. So that's letting us know it's those 2 rays joining here. Now, if it's part of a shape, it's a little different. First, identify what angle are they asking for. This little arc means they're asking for this angle. I suggest using color or just going over it the way I am. And now recognize that L is your vertex. I can't call this angle L because there's more than one angle coming off that one vertex, but I can put the L in the middle and then trace where it starts. It starts J and then goes to L and then M, or M, L, J. What's important is the vertex is in the middle. Now I could be asked to find the measure of a missing angle. So you'll need to know some things here. You'll need to remember these are supplementary. And supplementary means 2 angles that sum to 180. So angle A plus 130 equals 180. So what does A have to be? Well, we could say 180 minus 130, and we see that A has to be 50. So A is 50 degrees. You could be asked to find the measure of the angles with vertical angles. So remember, vertical angles are congruent. So I see one of these is 88, so that means its pair has to be 88. Now I have to find B. So this is where you want to remember supplementary angles again and say C plus B has to be that 180 degrees. They lay on a line. I already know what C is. It's 88 plus B has to be 180. So I can say 180 minus 88 is my new angle. So 18, 17, and I have 92 left for my B. So my B is 92 degrees, which means that if they ask me this angle, I could also answer it. They might also ask you to find the measure of a complementary angle pair. Notice here, this is the sign for a right angle. So I know these are complementary. That means 2 angles that sum to 90. So I would say that angle A plus 54 has to equal 90. So 90 minus 54 is equal to my A. So I know that A is 36 degrees. That is the end of your terminology. Please review it. Make sure you have the notes before you go and do the practice that goes with it. Now you're ready to do your assignment.